Good morning, Bob. It is so great to meet with you, and I really appreciate you joining me to do this podcast interview this morning. If you want to go ahead and jump right into it, I'd love to cover that list of questions and learn a little bit more about your background and experience as a franchise coach.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Tegan, and I look forward to doing this. So you want, in terms of my background, I've been in the industry forever. I'm a dinosaur. I've been in since 1986, long before you were born, by the way. And I broke into it first in the video industry. I owned, if you remember that industry, I doubt you made Blockbuster Video, West Coast Video, all those, but I owned a bunch of West Coast Videos in the Philadelphia area, took them up to New York as well. But I've owned multiple different franchise concepts that I've built and sold over my career. I was CEO of a national franchise chain, made consulting. Used to consult mainly on the side of franchise companies, helping them position for growth. Over the last 8 years, I think it's been, I've morphed entirely on the side of working with individuals, with franchise investors, with groups that are looking to find, fund, and acquire the right franchise fit for them.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think you bring a wealth of knowledge, and that's great to hear that you have so much experience in the franchising world. I think it really provides, the opportunity for you to give some insight to people that maybe don't know so much about franchising. So that's great to hear.
And believe me, I believe in the franchise model as well. I still own franchises. Just bought one 15 months ago, opened the first unit. I bought 6 units of a concept. Opened the first unit 3 months ago and getting ready to open the second unit. So
wow,
love the franchise.
That's awesome to hear. Now, a bit of a more specific question for you, Bob. Mm-hmm. When you work with clients, what is your process for understanding their goals and skills and also their financial needs before you go ahead and recommend a franchise to them?
Oh, great question. Well, I mean, I take them through a structured process. First thing I do is I have a conversation with someone just to see if it makes sense for us to work together. Because sure, it's not going to make sense for everyone. Some people, right, but some people maybe not. Mm-hmm. But the first step of my process, after having a brief conversation with them to assess if they want to go forward, if it makes sense for us to go forward, the first step of my process, I ask them to complete a confidential questionnaire. Generally, it takes 20, 30 minutes to complete the confidential questionnaire. That gives me the initial information I need on them to start doing my job properly. And then we follow that up with a consultation. On a consultation, I'll spend about an hour on a Zoom call with them, just getting to know them. We'll review their confidential questionnaire together. I'll have tons of questions for them. They'll have tons of questions for me. I'm gathering information in the early stages. I take all that information, I absorb it. I create a summary for my own internal use. Then I use that summary to start identifying brands that I think will be a good fit for them. And I will look at a massive host of brands initially and have a whittling down process. I try to get it down to maybe 5 or 6 brands on the initial round that I think might be a good fit for them.
Right.
I send those brands to them. We review those brands together. I answer any questions about them, and then we start identifying maybe 2 or 3 they're more interested in to take a deeper dive into, and then I help them investigate those particular brands. Sure. The financial piece of this you asked about, what specifically did you want to know?
Yeah, just what is your process for, understanding their financial needs if you have one before you go ahead and recommend a franchise to them?
Yeah, well, obviously that has some impact on which brands I can show them. Part of my confidential questionnaire is asking some financial information, nothing too much in depth. And I'm not asking for Social Security numbers or anything of that nature, but just some broad stroke financial information so I can understand them better and understand what they may be able to get into and what their borrowing capabilities are. Right. The financial piece obviously is important because it dictates what they can get into. So just as an example, if they show me, for instance, they have a $250,000 net worth and have $50,000 that in liquid capital they can get into something with. Be the starting point, at least with brands that I deem as worthwhile brands. There's a lot of brands out there you probably don't want to go anywhere near. And I always have this conversation with candidates. There's over 4,000 brands. 70% of them, honestly, push off the table into the trash. You do not want to go near. But out of the 30%, there's some good ones, there's some better ones, there's some exceptional ones. But about 50K in liquid capital, 250 in net worth is the starting point for any decent brand, and that can go up to virtually anything. But 50K, we could probably look at brands up to 250K with borrowing. Typically, a lender's looking for 20% capitalization, just as a general rule of thumb. You can borrow 80%. So if someone says I could put 200K in something, we can look at brands up to $1 million. Not saying we need to do that, but at least they know where they stand.
Right. Yeah, no, those are all great points. I really like that you mentioned how many brands and models there are out there in the market, but you're aware of what ones to maybe stay clear of. And I think that's something really valuable that you bring to your clients as a franchise consultant, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that just go on the internet and they Google franchise models and they maybe aren't aware of some of the concepts that they should stay away from. So that's some really valuable insight you bring to the table.
Yeah, it's an absolute crapshoot, because if somebody's already looked at brands and I'd say about 50% of the people I work with have already, dove into this and looked at brands in the past, and you're going online, you're just doing a search. You're not seeing anything other than what the franchisor wants you to see. And it's unfortunate because many of these portals that, they're advertising on these brands, they're not the top brands either. And they may be brands you don't want to be involved in. And really, to see what's behind the curtain, you need to engage with the brand. In order to engage with the brand, you need an entree. And from my experience in this, if you just contact a brand cold and you're going through their website or some portal, they know that usually 95% of the people approaching them are not qualified. So they end up wasting a lot of time. So typically brands like to work with someone like me, because basically I'm not going to put somebody in front of a brand unless they are fully qualified for that brand and it makes sense for them. And conversely, I'm not going to put a brand in front of someone that the brand wouldn't click with, and vice versa, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great to hear. That kind of brings me to the next question that I wanted to ask you. And that's on the flip side of things. How do you evaluate and vet the franchises before you feel comfortable recommending them to a client? And are there any specific criteria you have about a franchise that is really important to you?
Yeah, there's extremely specific criteria that's important to me. Look, I will tell you, and I may not be the right person for everyone to work with, because I am very focused on the unit economics. I'm focused on ROI. I'm focused on earnings. So if someone is into, not saying I don't work with this, I always want to match passion with whatever the unit economics are of a brand. And because if you don't have financial success, I don't care what the widget is. I don't care how passionate you are about something. You may learn to not be passionate about that thing anymore if you don't have financial success. So that piece of it is extremely important to me. So I typically look at what's behind a brand.
Sure.
Is there a parent company behind a brand? What's the capitalization? What kind of capital do they have backing them? Extremely important these days. It's the days of franchises opening a unit or two and then like, hey, this is working, let's franchise it. And the vast majority of those fail. Those days, I mean, it takes a lot of capital to do a brand properly. So I look at what's behind the brand, not only from the capital, but is there a parent company behind the brand? What has been the success track record of the parent company in developing and growing brands, and the success of their franchisees? Do their franchisees validate well? Looking at even things like an FSO, a franchise sales organization. Now, people probably don't know what that is, but it's an organization that helps franchises grow. Why is that important? Like, what does it mean to a prospective franchisee if there's a franchise sales organization behind the brand? It's actually very, very important. The better franchise FSOs, franchise sales organizations out there, they're extremely selective with the brands that they bring in, because they want them to grow across the country, and they want to maintain their own reputation. So they don't want people to get into a brand that's a lesser brand and it just not succeed. But from my candidates that I work with, from their perspective, the benefit of that is if you can reliably predict or forecast that franchise is going to be all over the country, it creates more value for your franchise. Because if it's sold out in a region or it's sold out across the country, you can't buy it anymore. So if people are still trying to get into it and it's already sold out in that market, when they contact the company's going to say, sorry, nothing's available in the market. Everything's sold out. But we have a resale with John. Would you like us to introduce him to you? And so it's always in the back of my mind when I'm evaluating franchises, what exit strategy going to be? Okay. Most people don't even think of that unless it's a franchise investor, a lot of experience and so forth, but usually they're not thinking about that. So, but whether I have this discussion with a candidate I'm working with or not, that's always in the back of my mind. How are you going to get out? When do you want to get out of this? And if you position them with the right company, the right FSO, if you can, again, reliably predict that it's going to be sold out across the country, it's going to put that candidate in a much better position.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are all really excellent points. And again, I think that's some insight and value you bring to the table. You have this experience. You spent the past few decades watching brands, and you can identify, what is a good brand, what provides potential economic growth, and what doesn't. So yeah, that's really great to hear. Another question, and this one's a little bit more of a specific one for you, Bob. What's an example of a challenging client placement, and how did you work through it to help find that person a good franchise fit?
That's a great question. I've worked with people sometimes who have enough experience that they think maybe they know more than they do. And they come to me with a specific brand or a specific category in mind that they want to be into in franchising. And as we start going through the process, and often they'll tell me, that type of person, hey, sorry about that. That type of person may tell me, well, I don't need to go through the process. I know what I want, so just show me brands. Then it's not going to work out well. I'm not going to work with them if that's the case. Right. It's simply because they don't necessarily know what they don't know. And they may have been in food, perhaps even franchised in food. But if they've looked at a lot of franchise and they think they know, they don't know necessarily what is behind the curtain with many of these brands. So it's important for me to get to know them, to find out what their goals are. Okay, are you ROI driven? ROI, earnings. You don't focus on what the widget is as long as it's ethical, provides valued service to the community. And maybe they're looking for semi-passive. They want to do it on a part-time basis versus somebody who I term as an ideologue, for lack of a better term. I want to be in something that's a passion play for me. So it's really important for me to establish those parameters with them and get to know them that way, because often I'll show somebody something and they may say, initially, I can't see myself in that, want nothing to do with it. But I said, look, go through the process with that brand. We'll look at some of the brands you want to look at as well, but go through the process with this brand as well, and then see where the chips may fall. Yeah. One specific situation, I went through a similar situation with a candidate. It was a husband and wife team, and they came to me with certain concepts they wanted to get into. And I sensed that with them, that maybe based on what they're telling me they want to do in terms of their goals may not align with the types of brands that they're mentioning to me. So we went through the process. We went back and forth. I asked them to trust me. They did. They went through the process with a specific brand, and it's a service brand, and boring as can be. It's a gutter company. They install gutters on building. But just to make a long story, shorten it somewhat, it was a couple. They were both in corporate America. They both wanted to do this on the side and as a semi-passive brand. They work for the same company. So they fell in love with this brand. They got into it. They bought multiple territories. They started a few months into it, even though they said they wanted to work for the next couple of years because they were scared to death to let go of corporate America. They both stepped away from their job together. Like, are you kidding me? But they stepped away from their job. They dove into it full time. They're doing phenomenally well with this.
That's amazing.
And they came back to me and said, what else you got, Bob? And that was about 7-8 months ago. I put them into another brand. It kind of ties into the first brand that they're doing. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's such a great point. I think a lot of people come in and they want to find something that maybe fits the mold of what they do or what they feel comfortable or they have skills in. And, who would have thought of doing a gutter business? But that's an awesome success story. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, another specific question, Bob. When you work with clients, how do you tailor your approach with them who maybe have very varying financial needs or different financial backgrounds?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I mean, I need to assess their situation. I mean, and the finances will play a big part of this. If someone wants to get into something like a Sky Zone, trampoline park thing, millions and millions of dollars to get into that, and they have a $300,000 net worth, it's not going to work. But there are plenty of things that they can get into. So we have to assess their financial need, financial capabilities. We have to assess their borrowing power. I mean, there's money out there. I mean, there's SBA, there's traditional business loans, there's equipment leasing type things, vehicle and equipment leasing. There's something called a 401k rollover of the ROBS program, which is becoming really, really popular, where you can roll funds out of a 401k or an IRA and into a business without taxation, without penalty, without interest. So I take them through those things to try to understand where they are from a financial standpoint. And, again, if somebody can come to the table with 50K in liquidity and a $250,000 net worth, that's the starting point. We can look at some pretty good brands. I mean, there's some brands that are cheaper. So I could say, hey, you want to spend $25,000 all in and get into a franchise? Sure. It's not worthwhile. It's not. Sure. You're just the probability of you succeeding is going to be very low.
Right.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are really great points. And I like that you mentioned that there's different funding options as well, because some people, I'm sure they're not aware of the various ways to fund a franchise when they've never even considered this. So yeah, that's really excellent.
A lot of people say to me they didn't even realize you could finance franchising. And it's often they will also think that, hey, because maybe they spoke to their bank and their bank said, is this a startup business? Well, yeah, it's a franchise, but I'm just starting up. Oh, that's startup. We don't fund startups. Well, that's not true. Many banks do. It's just their bank doesn't. The banks that are comfortable with it and have financed many of these startups and know the franchises out there. That's important. Also, working with the right lender.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that's a really great point. Now, I know you just shared a really great example, but if you don't mind, do you have another example or story of a particular client that you worked with and you helped them find the right business and have success? And how did that make you feel as a franchise consultant to be a part of that?
It always, that is, it sounds corny, but honestly, that is a huge reason, maybe the primary reason why I have to make money, but that's the primary reason that I do what I do. I also invest in franchises, and I don't need the money in franchise consulting, but I look at it kind of as my way to kind of give back. I've had my success in franchising. I have this wealth of knowledge that I've developed since 1986. That I can impart to people. And that gives me a great thrill to see people, go through a process with them, get to know them, become friends with them, and then get them into a brand where I know that I really feel comfortable that they're going to have a great amount of success. And then once I have a client and once they've moved forward with the brand, that's not the end. I mean, I typically will stay in communicate as much as I can, as much as people want to do that. My calendar can get overwhelmed if I do it too much, but I like to stay in touch with them and just track their success and see how they're see how they're doing. And I mean, I can give you one example. I worked with a young guy, 28 years old, just wanted to get out of corporate America, had all this vim and vigor, wanted to, do something on his own. And I love in those situations in particular, working with somebody young, because they have such a long runway for growth. They can grow not only in one franchise, but expand that one, but didn't get into multiples and really build an empire. Not to say that when I'm working with somebody who is in their 50s and 60s, and in some cases in their 70s, I have had plenty of those types of clients too, as well. And I always say, hey, look, when you're in your 70s, you might be saying, I wish I did this when I was in my 60s. And it's the same thing. In your 60s, you wish you did it in your 50s. It's never too late, because it's just a different strategy, the way you approach it. But anyway, this young guy that I placed in his franchise, he just won Rookie of the Year with the franchise company that he was with. And he's killing it. He's doing so well. And he just informed me that, in a year he's coming back to me. He wants to look for another franchise that he can tie into that particular franchise.
That's incredible. Wow. Congratulations. That's super amazing to hear. I know that you run your business with a lot of integrity, and that's really wonderful to hear that you're so passionate about helping others, and you've had so much success in doing so. So excellent. Now, last question for you, Bob. What are some of the most common misconceptions that clients have about franchising, and how do you address those?
Yeah, great question. That one misconception is that franchise companies are going to, it's like getting another job. You're working for them. Not the case with the better companies. And if it's a company, and there's plenty of case studies on companies that did treat franchisees that way, and generally it doesn't go so well long term for those companies. But the companies that treat people as a partner, and the better companies, that's exactly what they do. There's an old something that I actually put into a mission statement as part of a mission statement when I was CEO of a national brand. Part of that mission statement was, your success is our success. Unless the franchisees have success, you cannot, as a franchise company, you cannot succeed long term. Absolutely. And consequently, if brands don't adopt that, and I can't assess that from them in my evaluation of the brand, I'm not putting people in front of them. I don't feel comfortable in putting people in front of them. So often candidates, their misconception is, I'm buying myself a job. That should not be the case. That's the last thing you want to do, is trade one job for another. The real value, in my opinion, in franchising is getting into a brand and building something, and building equity in something. Okay. Not just, you're going to have a great passion about building this business and enjoying the business and making great money with it, but also positioning yourself, if you want, for a transaction at some point in the future. And that's the other point. People say, well, can I sell this? Yeah, absolutely. It's your business. Now, does franchise company reserve the right to approve the buyer? Yeah, they want whoever it is to be successful, but as long as it meets the minimum standards that they outline, absolutely, you can sell the business.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I do hear what you're saying about a lot of people, feeling like they're buying a job. But to your point, if in the right model, it's their independent business, and the right model should allow for some autonomy and flexibility for a person to run it as their own. So
absolutely.
Great point. Bob, was there anything else that you would like to share about your business or your journey as a franchise consultant?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fun journey. And a couple more years I have to do this, and then I think I'm going to hang it up, and I'm positioning my daughter to be part of my business, and I'll transition for a few more years with her. But
amazing.
Look, anybody that I love to help people. I love to help people find their dream, be happy to do so. I'm not for everybody. We may not work well together. It may not make sense, but if anybody is interested in learning more or having a 15-minute conversation to see if it even makes sense to work together, reach out to me. Go to my website at franchisewithbob.com or reach out to me by email at bob@franchisewithbob.com. Pretty simple.
Excellent. Well, it's been amazing chatting with you, Bob, and learning more about your background. And yeah, I look forward to your success and seeing your daughter's success in the business.
Thank you, Tegan. Greatly enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Have a good one.